today is Jim Christopher. Jim, how you doing?
I'm good, David. How are you?
I'm doing great. What do you do?
I am the director for technical curriculum at Pluralsight, and I curate all of our data content. So anything that targets a data professional, from relational databases to machine learning, has to go through me.
That's awesome. I'm a big Pluralsight fan.
Me too.
I talk it up all the time. I was a customer, and then I became an MVP, and then they gave me one for free. And I don't know if you noticed that originally they didn't give you the full Pluralsight. Mm-hmm. The MVP's got the there was the level 1 where you could watch online, and level 2 where you actually got to download and stuff. And I would pay the difference.
Yeah.
Now, of course, they give both to the MVP. So, but it was worth it to me to get that. I'm just saying I'm a fan. That's all I'm saying. I like it.
It's good. It's good to hear.
And it's great to have you on my show finally after all these years.
I know. We've had a couple of false starts, but I'm glad that we're finally doing this.
Let's talk about data scientists, because we had a conversation earlier that was really interesting. Do you consider yourself a data scientist?
No, not at all. I don't consider myself a practitioner, but I have to sort of have a very, very broad but shallow knowledge in this field, and I work with a lot of people who are practitioners.
Because you're curating all these courses that they're doing.
Correct.
They're diving deep into.
Basically, yeah. So, like one of the important aspects of my job is like my BS detector has to be really finely tuned. You know.
Can you turn it off for the next 15 minutes?
Yes. It's been off for a while now. So I have to be able to sort of talk the talk, understand what they're talking about, and just to know whether or not they can teach is the big thing. So, my background was cognitive science. I have a degree in cognitive science, which involved a lot of statistics, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and that carried over into like the way data science behaves now. It's a different field, but the foundations are the same. So.
All right, well, let's define data science. Let's start with that.
Good luck. So data science is a process. It's not just a set of technologies. It's a process for sort of taking large amounts or any amount of data and translating it into an action, right?
Some usable information.
Usable information, right? So
actionable information.
Yes. So there's typically it's almost like the scientific method that's applied to data sets.
Okay, and that leads us into the conversation we had before off camera, which is that definition is becoming less meaningful as time goes on.
I think so. Yeah, that's my impression. So there's a corollary to, we use the term data scientist today, and in the past we used the term computer scientist to refer to people who wrote code for computers. Mm-hmm. But if you step in the Wayback Machine to like the 60s, right? My ex-father-in-law, excuse me, there was no computer science degree. He got a degree in physics, right? And then he went on to, write code for NASA and JPL and all this interesting stuff.
Oh wow!
So eventually, like after he graduated, they became a computer science degree.
Okay.
And you had to have one if you wanted to work in the field.
Correct. Yeah. Which meant, and you couldn't really do it on your own unless you worked in the field, because there were no home computers in those days.
Correct, yeah. There was a lack of resources that would be available to you.
That was a big barrier to entry.
Yeah, absolutely.
To work as a programmer, you had to work for a company that owned a mainframe, and they weren't going to hire you without an advanced degree.
Correct. Yeah, because that's some expensive stuff you're working on.
Right. And that all changed in the 1980s, I guess, when the IBM PC compatibles came out, and the Apple II came out, that sort of thing.
The TRS-80 was my first experience.
Okay, yeah, that was that wasn't quite the democratizing one.
Correct.
But a couple years later, suddenly for a couple $1,000s, you could buy a computer and you could write code and you could call yourself a consultant.
That's right.
That was a huge drop in those barriers to entry.
Yep.
And something similar is happening now with data science?
Well, so if you look at the trend, like what's happening right now when you talk to people who are data scientists or people who want to hire data scientists, there's a lot of people sort of end up back at that degree. Like you should have a PhD in analytics or statistics or something to come into this field.
Because there's so much math involved?
Yeah, but that's the funny thing. Like sometimes it's a lot of math, but it's also a lot of programming. It's a lot of statistics. It's sort of the intersection of all this stuff.
All right.
But what happened with computer science was a lot of it became commoditized. Like you talked about sort of the downsizing and personalization of computers. Right? So the hardware that you need to become a computer scientist just became readily available. That's kind of already happening with data science, right? We have cloud platforms that are readily available.
Yep.
They're cheap. Storage is cheap. Computing
Yep.
power is cheap, and you can lease it on demand. So that is not really a barrier.
Yeah, and I would argue that's one of the big reasons why data science has exploded in the last couple of
Absolutely.
years. Is because
Absolutely.
the availability of CPUs and storage
Yeah.
is it's available and it's cheap.
Yep. Yeah, and so what you're seeing there is, with computer science, there was a commoditization of not just the hardware, but even the things that you needed to know, the knowledge became encapsulated for you. Like we
Okay.
have platforms and languages, and you no longer had to sort of derive your own sorting algorithms. Let's say
Okay.
they were just available for you.
Just use somebody else.
Correct.
Don't reinvent the wheel. They say.
Correct. Yeah. So now, if you look at what's happening with data science, they're already starting sort of in an accelerated place where, the platforms, the hardware, the computing power is being commoditized. But at the same time, like all the lessons learned from software development are being applied to data science as well. So instead of having to hand roll these massive AI systems, like when I was doing it 20 years ago in school, it took me 6 months to get something up and running, and I might not have enough data to train it. And that's not the problem today. The problem today is we have so much data, we can get something up and running in an hour. In fact, we could automate the process of building AI systems and letting them compete to see which one is the most effective. And that would just have been unheard of when I was in school.
So that sounds like a good thing. Is that a good thing?
I think so.
All right.
Yeah, I absolutely think that's a good thing.
Is there any downside to it?
Yeah, I mean, so there's like a barrier. Like the barrier is not technology anymore. The barrier is knowledge.
Right.
I'm seeing a lot of developers who are going into the data space, like trying to do data science kind of projects without the necessary background, and it's actually a stumbling block. They don't realize it until it's too late. So it's like really easy to go into like Azure ML, which is a fantastic platform for building
Yeah, just drag and drop the shapes.
drag and drop shapes. And I've actually seen developers go in there with data and like, well, does this work? No. Does this work? No. Does this work? No. And eventually they get something that has an answer that seems right, and they sort of move on with their lives. But unless you really know what you're doing and understand the difference between like, the logistic regression versus linear regression, and when the algorithm applies, you're not going to get a solution that's going to work.
Okay, so ML Studio, which is the tool you described, it solves one problem, is that you don't have to write a lot of code. You
Yeah.
can drag and drop things. But it doesn't solve the problem that you still have to have a basic understanding of machine learning in order to use it, in order to decide which algorithms to use, which categorizations to use, that sort of thing.
Exactly, and there's still a corollary with software development, right? So software, no one calls himself a computer scientist anymore unless they go through school, get the degree. Like I didn't do that. I'm just a programmer, right?
Okay.
I develop software.
My degree is not in computer science.
Oh, it's not?
Neither one of them are.
What are they, in just out of curiosity?
My undergraduate is in biochemistry, and then I have a master's in finance.
Very nice.
So of course I'm doing this.
Yeah, right. Here we are.
Did your BS detector just go off?
No, actually, it did not. So I'm a music composition major, and I have a degree in cognitive science. So, and here I am, sitting at the table with David. So you can learn how to create, like for example, as a software developer, you can learn how to create a web application, and you don't have to understand the intricacies of like HTTP.
Yes, that's true.
There's a lot of stuff in there that gets wrapped up for you.
Right. It may cause problems later on when you go back to that.
Bingo. Yeah, and that's the thing. If you can create something very simple, and as long as you stay simple, it doesn't bite you. But if you have to get any kind of level of complexity, you
Sure.
have to get into the weeds pretty quick. I think the same thing's going to happen with data science. We have a lot of reasonable platforms, a lot of computing power. It's very easy to use, and it's almost deceptively simple. But what happens is you end up with something that looks like an answer. Like you have a trained AI that is giving you a prediction, but a true data scientist, someone who has experience in the area, will be able to look at it and tell you that it's not going to work.
I see. There's people watching this that are interested in getting into data science. There's a lot of reasons why, not the least of which is that you can make a lot of money as a data scientist.
Yes,
So
you can.
it's kind of a hot field right now.
Yep.
I know this because my LinkedIn spam is really high right now.
Yep.
But how can they protect themselves against this potential problem you just described?
Yeah. So I mean, honestly, at this point, if you actually do want to break into data science, one of those most straightforward ways is to go get a degree. Like maybe not at a university, but through an online program. But if you just want to be working in that field, there's lots of things you can do. If you have the programming chops, but you don't have the analytics background,
Okay.
that's a really great place to start. So just becoming familiar with commonly used algorithms, clustering algorithms, and classification algorithms, neural networks. This stuff is readily available to you. But, anything from Pluralsight courses to O'Reilly books to blogs, the amount of information that is covering these things is
So regardless, the key is to educate yourself, whether
Yeah.
it's through formal university education or through online training like Pluralsight or
Correct.
books like O'Reilly.
Yeah. And so, and I think there's 3 pillars of knowledge that you kind of have to work in the space. And one is programming, and I would assume that your viewers sort of have that background or they know how to get it. But the other 2, like the analytics background, again, most of it's available online. There's lots of stuff available. But then the third one would be like the business acumen. And again, that's not, I don't quite have that, so I don't know where to get it. But
maybe you could partner with somebody that has that.
That's a really great idea.
Working in a consulting company and make sure there's somebody around that understands the problem we're trying to solve.
That's always handy.
Okay. This is really interesting. It's an idea. I've kind of thought about this before in the past about I'm old enough to remember when computer science became, I call it democratized, and how
That's a great word.
awesome that was in some ways, how empowering it was, and the problems it caused in other ways as people flooded into the industry. But I hadn't really thought about it in terms of data science, which is a trend right now, and of course in software, IT, every trend is accelerating.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like technology is so accelerating.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm seeing evidence of this now just from my job and having to find authors to work in the space for a Pluralsight. But it does seem to be accelerating in that direction. And I see a really strong corollary with what happened in computer science happening to data science, but it's massively accelerated because of all the lessons we've already learned.
Really interesting. Are you still doing a lot of public speaking?
I'm ramping back up again. I took a couple of years off, but yeah.
Are you have anything scheduled?
Nothing yet, but I am planning some small engagements early next year.
You've got some online courses though, right?
I do. Yeah, I have some courses.
Promote them. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, well, so I have some
I've got
courses.
Tens of viewers that want to hear about this.
Both of them.
This will be good for your career.
So I have on Pluralsight. I have some courses around PowerShell, and they're mostly aimed at developers. Though they're not really ops-y courses. They're more like how to use PowerShell to sort of engage your development environment. But also I have a course on Log4Net, which was always my favorite logging framework, and it's certainly not going anywhere.
Sure, it's been around a long time.
It has. It has been around and has served many, many people. Saved my hide many times. Thank you. So I have courses on those. I also have courses around instrumentation, telemetry, and Windows applications. I have one on performance counters, which is just a black hole. I mean, if you want to go in and learn how to do that, good luck. It's a lot of work, but it's one of those things that you just sort of have to do if you want the data out of your application.
Jim, thanks so much.
Absolutely, David. Thank you. The most lasting friendships I've ever had have always been created around technology.
That's good.
I like that.
Right. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.